All right, and I think we are live. So good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you to all of our hosts from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, DHS, FEMA, and U.S. Northcom. My name is Kathy Fulton. I serve as the Executive Director of an organization called the American Logistics Aid Network. And today we're going to be talking about a subject that has received a lot of attention throughout the pandemic, and it just happens to be my favorite topic, which is supply chain. So we know that the pandemic has put an enormous strain on global and domestic supply chains. And one area that's received increased observation really is our food supply chains. The networks that make up these supply chains have been represented all throughout the media as being at risk of failure multiple times during the past few months. And a lot of that comes from extreme sustained demands, surges in demand, as well as fragmentation and disruption of supply. We know that the virus has also changed how we obtain our food, a move away from restaurant and retail, and an increase in curbside and home delivery. All of these changes that we've seen in the commercial sector are also disrupting our humanitarian food supply chains, including the logistics of getting food from farms to food banks, and then further moving that food from food banks to pantries and ultimately to families. So today we have an incredible lineup of speakers, and they're going to address how their organizations are helping to address these challenges that we've talked about. So with that, I'm just going to ask our panelists to do a quick introduction of themselves before we dig into some moderated questions, and then at the end we'll have some time for your questions to the panelists. So Catherine, let me start with you. Just tell us a little bit about who you are and who you represent.
Sure. So Catherine Strickland, I'm the Chief Network Officer at Feeding America, and we are the largest hunger relief organization in the U.S. with a network of over 200 food banks covering every county in Puerto Rico in the U.S.
Great, thank you. Gigi.
Yes, my name is Gigi Wolfe. I'm a project engineer with FedEx Express in Memphis, Tennessee. I work in a team called Global Planning, Engineering, Research and Technology. And I work in particular, I'm an engineer, and I work on the processes and the technologies for first and last mile pickups and deliveries. And so I'm here because I've worked with another organization, and I've worked across the globe on some processes and practices we put in place with the current situation with the quarantine.
Great, yeah, processes are all disrupted right now. Dan.
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, this is Dan Fedor with Uber Freight. My role at Uber Freight is Enterprise Account Executive. Specifically, I work in the industrial sector, but the pandemic has given me the opportunity to work across all of our lines of business, and the pandemic itself has given me the opportunity to work really closely with some of our programs aimed at the pandemic, and work in conjunction with Kathy and Catherine and a variety of organizations throughout the country. And we've been able to help move relief loads of everything from pet food to PPE with some of our programs and some of our tremendous partners. And I'll look forward to talking more about that later in the panel.
Great, thank you. So thank you all for being here today. What a terrific cross section of our supply chains, of our food supply chains. So with that, let's dig in. I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that COVID has brought up. We know that there's increased friction in our supply chains. So maybe let's start by talking about how those disruptions have affected you and your clients. And Catherine, I kind of want to start with you.
Sure. So thank you so much, Kathy. I really appreciate this opportunity, and just are truly grateful to the U.S. Chamber Foundation for letting us shed a spotlight on the issue of hunger, particularly in this moment. And I wanted to start off by sharing a brief story, because before I joined Feeding America about 6 months ago, I had the privilege for working for one of our member food banks in Birmingham, Alabama. And last year, I was visiting one of our food bank partners, and I was speaking with a gentleman who had lost his job after 30 years. He was also taking care of his brother, and he had just pawned his tools. He worked in construction so that he could buy food. And of course, that made it even harder for him to find new work. And so we are literally sitting knee to knee facing each other in this small church in Walker County, Alabama. And he tells me that this food pantry is keeping him from starving. And I have to tell you that when someone shares with you that the food your organization provides is their lifeline, you feel compelled to act. And that is truly what the heart of Feeding America is all about, acting to ensure that no child, no parent, no senior, no neighbor ever faces hunger in America. And so even in the best of times, the need that we see is very real and urgent. So a little bit about Feeding America to give you some background so you can see how the COVID-19 impacted us. So we are the largest hunger relief organization in the US, and last year we distributed 4.5 billion meals to 37 million Americans. And we did that with the help of 2 million volunteers, civic-minded local businesses like many of you in the audience today, and 60,000 community-based food programs that we supply food to. And so to put this in perspective a little bit, our grassroots network has 4 times the number of retail outlets than McDonald's does across the US, just to put that into scale. So how is it that we're able to provide these millions of meals? And essentially, we are very much aligned with the food industry. We are securing food donations from national food manufacturers, retail grocery stores, shippers, packers, farmers. And we work closely with these partners to match excess supply with food banks across the country, and then in turn, those food pantries. So last year, we rescued over 3 billion pounds of food. And when you think about that, that's 90,000 truckloads of food that we saved from going to needlessly to waste in local landfills. And instead, we were able to feed people in need. So that gives you a little bit of background about how we work. Okay, so now enter the pandemic, COVID-19. And the same forces that wreaked havoc in the food supply chain hit us with a triple whammy in terms of we saw unprecedented demand for food assistance, a dramatic decline in our food donations, and we had this need to adapt our entire distribution model due to a shortage of volunteers literally overnight. It was what I like to call a perfect storm. So I just wanted to unpack each of these challenges just a little bit with you. So in terms of the unprecedented demand, the first whammy that hit us, before the pandemic, 37 million Americans were thought to be food insecure. And today, we estimate that over 54 million people are at risk of hunger in the US. This is a 46% increase over just the span of a few months. And I wanted to share with you the story of a gentleman named Lewis who came to visit one of our food bank members. He said that he was there on behalf of himself, his wife, and his brother. And between the 3 of them, they had lost a total of 5 jobs due to the pandemic. And he just never saw this coming. He never thought that he would be in this position. In fact, he had been a donor to the food bank. And here he was coming, looking for assistance. And we are seeing millions upon millions turn to us in the wake of recent job losses, seeking food assistance, 40% of whom have never asked for help from us before. This is truly unprecedented times. I also wanted to stress the fact that this spring, schools closed to students early. And now, of course, we're in the summer where schools are closed. And this has meant that millions of children have lost access to free and reduced price meals at school. And for many of them, this has been the most reliable and healthy meal that they've had access to. And what this means in this moment is that in America today, 1 in 4 children is at risk of hunger. 1 in 4 in this country. I did have some slides to present, but we can pass those on. I'm sure many of you have seen in the news, just the lines of cars, 2 miles worth of cars in line waiting for food assistance. And it doesn't matter if you were in California or Dayton, Ohio. We've just seen this all across the country. So now I want to talk a little bit about the second whammy. So at the same time that we face this surge in demand, we've also been contending with this precipitous and sudden drop in our food donations. So if you recall, in the middle of at the beginning of the pandemic, there was this run on grocery stores. So US grocery sales are up 80 to 200% compared to last year. And early on in the pandemic, this meant that grocers and food manufacturers had little or no surplus to donate to us, particularly non-perishables, which is what we really needed in this moment. And so our food banks saw a drop in donations anywhere from 40 to 70% just when the need was spiking. And I've got pictures of rows of empty pallet spaces in food banks during this time, so you could just see how depleted our inventories were, because we had more food going out than coming in. So what we needed to do is pivot to what food supplies were available, which were perishables, that because of the closure in the restaurant industry, suddenly fresh produce and dairy and some meats were available to us. So we had to pivot to be able to handle this type of product, which needs special care in handling, just because it needs to be temperature controlled. So I'm very proud to say that while we came very close, there was not a single food bank that ran out of food entirely. And now that we have access to federal commodities, like the Farmers to Families Food Box program, and the TFAP program, which keeps US farmers solvent, our access to regular donations are improving, but though it has not risen to the level of where we were pre-pandemic. And then I just wanted to, go ahead.
Please, because I think what you're about to say is going to tee up nicely what I think Gigi wants to talk about. So go ahead.
Sure. So, and then the third kind of whammy that hit us was this impact on our distribution model. So as I mentioned earlier, we normally depend upon 2 million volunteers a month who help us pack and sort and distribute food. But out of a concern for safety, we limited or closed our volunteer shifts. And so we saw a decrease of 70% in terms of our volunteer workforce. And so we had to reach out to new and different partners like the National Guard and reinvent how our distributions work in order to keep people safe. And the good news is that we did figure this out rather quickly, and we're able to stand up a new model and share that online with food banks across the country. And so hopefully that gives you a quick snapshot of this triple whammy that just hit us very hard.
Yeah. So thank you, Catherine, for describing that particular challenge, your challenges. Gigi, as an engineer, you had to have been looking at that and at your own network over the past few months and just saying, what are we looking at? So maybe describe a little bit about your challenges and go ahead.
So when we first heard about COVID, when we heard about Wuhan in China, as a company, we were informed, we learned that we were going to decrease flights to China, and we were allowing pilots to opt out of flying if required. Company keeps everybody very informed. Initially, we were looking at this as just a disaster relief. FedEx does a lot of disaster relief. We were transporting equipment there, PPEs. Until then, we realized we've got to batten down ourselves. In order to keep operating, we had to protect everyone on the front line, and including ourselves at corporate offices. And so we had to reinvent some procedures and processes. Interestingly enough, there was 100% unanimous, we're here to support it across the company, because everyone in this company knows why we're here and what we do, and that at times you're needed. Now, someone could say what I do, because I'm working in an office in Memphis, Tennessee, isn't as needed, and that's fine. But frontline couriers, handlers, pilots, they're absolutely needed, and shipments need to get where they needed to be. So we started modifying, and FedEx actually is very good at that, because we can't control the weather, and we can't control circumstances, and we really can't control what packages customers decide to ship on which day. We try to, but it doesn't work. So we're good at flexibility. And so we started flexibility. The way we operate is everyone in their own area of the world has what we call best practices. We've got processes defined. Not shocking, but many of those are the same across the globe because we share them. So as we decided to make some changes in the US, we are sharing that across the globe. I particularly am an engineer, and I work specifically on first and last mile deliveries. I represent all the courier processes. So I work very closely with marketing because couriers interact with customers, shippers, and recipients. And the first thing we found is in the US, for sure, because we're very close to the US organization, customers didn't want to sign for packages. And you could say as a company, no big deal. Who cares if no one signs for the package? It's a big deal for shippers because packages need to get to the right location and the right person in many cases, and sometimes to an adult. So, so we had to modify processes because nobody wants to touch a courier stylus. And I'll tell you what, our couriers said, we don't want our customers touching our stylus. I mean, it makes sense. So we came up with a new process and enacted it immediately. We updated the service guide with it immediately and our policies. So it was the new way. When do we go back? I don't know. Maybe never. Maybe this will be the new way that we get signatures. But we enacted that. And then Catherine was talking about perishables. So as COVID was taking off, we found businesses being closed. And so we go to make a delivery and no one's there. Our normal practice is we do 3 attempts, and every time we make an attempt, we call the next that evening to let the customer know we tried today, you're going to be there tomorrow. Nobody was there because businesses were closed. And as time went on, this volume was getting way over our heads in warehousing, because our stations are meant to store some packages for customers as needed, but these stations aren't meant to be a warehouse. So we had to come up with some processes and procedures for keeping packages safe, including perishables where needed. So Catherine, in the future, we need to talk about how you could maybe take some of those perishable food items and get them delivered. Just saying.
I would love to.
Collaboration in action.
Many times our shippers say after 5 days, get rid of it. So yeah, so anyway, so it was just a constant changes. Now we're at a plateau, but we're in the new order, the new world. And everyone's fairly comfortable because we've gotten there. The company has provided multiple communications across the globe. They've provided everyone with equipment. We all have our FedEx Strong masks, hashtag FedEx Strong. You know, it's good because executives know that they back the company. It's hard to go up to a house that could be contagious, right? And make a delivery. But we figured out how to do it. And that's the bottom line. We kept the business running, we kept packages moving. And at the same time, we were sending relief where needed.
Great, thank you for that. And I know you have a great story that we're gonna come back to here in a few minutes about leveraging your skills to help Feeding America. So Dan, tell me about the challenges that you guys are dealing with. I mean, you know, I've watched a lot about freight flows and transportation rates and everything. And, you know, transportation has just been so significantly disrupted throughout all of this. Yet you guys have found a way to thrive, continue to service your customers, as well as provide relief. So talk to us about the challenges.
Happy to. Thank you, Kathy. And I thought, as I was thinking about this, and I want to reiterate, it is really, really hard to give things away. Anyone who's ever volunteered at a food bank or whatnot, it's hard. It's a common thing to say, oh, it'd be great to give these to someone, but it's really hard to put the logistics together to give, especially perishable food, away. So my hat's off to everyone involved with that process. And what I should do, Uber Freight has been around for 4 years, but I find sometimes that people are surprised to hear that Uber Freight has a freight brokerage. And so for the members of the audience that may not be familiar, Uber Freight is a traditional brokerage using the same power of your Uber Rides platform, meaning that we go after shippers to move their loads, and then we can put those loads on a system where drivers can book those loads through the convenience of a smartphone application anytime, day or night, 24 hours a day, 365 a year. But you're absolutely right on this. I think I saw two kind of phases with our response to the pandemic. The first phase was kind of holding down the fort. In other words, we saw this gigantic imbalance of freight. I myself am part of the industrials vertical. So of course, my tier one auto suppliers, folks shipping widgets across the country either completely stopped or dramatically reduced their shipments because their plants and stores simply closed. So I found myself in a bit of a rut personally in terms of moving freight, while some of my colleagues inside the company with food and bev and consumer product were busier than they've ever been. We saw a 250% increase in spot opportunities in the month of March. And as Catherine and everyone has referenced, we all have a story of trying to find toilet paper at Costco. I think we bought some for $20 at our local grocery at some point, but it was completely related, and we got to watch that from a front row seat within Uber Freight. Then as I wouldn't say calmed down, but as things began to level out and freight began to move again across all lines of business, I think that's when Uber Freight was able to step back and take a breath and see how can we assist in relief efforts using the power of Uber writ large. So in conjunction with Feeding America, other corporate partners like Salesforce, we put forward some programs to provide relief loads, if you will, to move critical products, food, PPE, et cetera, to places around the country at either reduced cost or no cost, depending on what was being shipped. And that program has been a wonderful opportunity to react. From a business perspective, what we saw was, yes, that imbalance, high emphasis on food and bev, consumer product. And then we had an opportunity to, like I said, go back in and see where we could help. And we are very carrier focused. And so we were able to provide since we have this broader platform of Uber writ large, we were able to utilize our Uber Eats components to provide hot meals to drivers, sanitation kits to drivers, while at the same time trying to help shippers out. So it really provided us an opportunity to help organizations like Feeding America, and then bring our corporate partners together with those organizations to get them to donate needed goods and then provide the transportation to do so.
Yeah, and great. I can't wait. I know you're going to share a few of those stories with us. Let's talk now about kind of the response to the challenges that you guys have all teed up. And Gigi, I know you have this terrific story that I would love for you to share about a solution that you guys helped craft to help not just, it wasn't just focused on yourself, but it was really about getting food to Americans. So maybe, Gigi, if you would just start and share that with us.
Do it. So one of the corporate departments at FedEx came to me and said, we've got a partner, Team Rubicon, and they're delivering meals across the country, and they don't have their normal drivers because their normal drivers are older and they're in the realm of concern with COVID. So these are younger drivers. They don't normally hold these positions. And we need to create better routes for these drivers. And so immediately I'm thinking, is this a tool? Is it technology? They're asking us to build something for them. So I said, I'd really like a conversation to understand this better because I'm not sure what they need. So we had a conversation with two members from Team Rubicon. And they said, no, we're really not, we don't provide our drivers anything specific. And I said, okay, well, here's what we could do. I could explain to you some principles and concepts that we've been using since we started the company 45 years ago. We're still practicing them today, and some best practices. And no one gets excited about best practices and process. It's not cool. It's not a neat technology, right? But
supply chain geeks do. Come on.
It works. And I'll tell you what, it works across the globe. We've been doing it for years, so I can attest to it. It works. And it could be practiced in multiple areas. It's not a FedEx only solution. And so I shared those with the team, and then they took those back to share with the drivers. It wasn't overly complicated. It didn't require tools and equipment, so it could be shared. And I think, from my understanding, it's worked so far to provide the support they needed.
Yeah, I know that a lot of businesses themselves were trying to figure out these last mile things.
Right.
I think you had something more to say, and I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I have the 2 slides that I shared with them that literally said the message. So it's not overly complicated, but I could share those with the audience if you're interested.
Yeah, please.
Okay. If I can share the correct screen, this will be good. Okay. Are you seeing a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm going to put it on slideshow. There's just 2 screens, and there's not a whole lot to say. But here's what I explained to them. So we like the term drive less, deliver more. We're not a company that supports driving faster, but if you create routes that are much more dense, it drives efficiency. So what I mean by that is, take a downtown area, having someone scatter across the entire downtown area and having multiple people crisscross over each other is not efficient. So we break up geographies into segments, into sections, and you try to eliminate driving. Now, as you'll see in this picture here, sometimes you have to drive, right? That's the little FedEx truck over there. I'm going to put it in slideshow, so maybe it's a little bigger. Are you seeing the larger picture now? Or is it the same?
Yeah, I think we're seeing presenter mode, so it may have been a little bigger on the other view.
Okay. All right. There's a truck there. This is a truck here. Point being, though, is it can be used anywhere. Consistency develops knowledge. Anytime you have a driver, send that driver to the same area every time. I'll tell you what, over the last 15 years, we probably have our couriers in the same areas that they've been driving for years, for a couple of reasons. One, they learn the area. They learn the streets. They learn the traffic patterns. 2, maybe most important, they learn their customers. They learn nuances about their customers. That's important. That's really important. And so keep the driver in the same area. Even if they're getting bored, that just makes it more efficient, develops that knowledge. And then the knowledge yields productivity over time. So again, who knew that this was going to go on for this long, right? But if the same drivers since March are still working the same areas, they've become experts of that area. They probably know their customers. And that's only good. It's not going to be a bad thing. So then I mentioned earlier that FedEx is very flexible. So we don't go to every house on the block. We only go where we have work, where we have packages to deliver. So we have to be flexible. We have this concept of, again, we're still doing it today across the globe. We don't have the technology yet to do it. That's what I'm working on now. But what this diagram will show you is, in a normal day, you'll have routes. Now, this doesn't look realistic like a map, right? But this is just meant to describe, you have a geography that a route is assigned to. So this, say, would be your first courier, second courier, and so forth. This baseline is where all your deliveries will come from. So if you have a food bank or a restaurant that you're working out of, everything's coming from here and going out into your area. So this is a normal day for your routes. This is where you kind of set some boundaries. Setting boundaries. You try to work from local landmarks, major roads, so it's very clear for a driver where they're working. Understanding your work is important. So what's a normal day for this route versus this route? We look back at these two couriers. They have probably, likely, a very different stop per hour. When we call a stop, that's where a customer and address intersect. Because sometimes you can have an address with two customers. Very common in Asian countries. And sometimes you can have a customer with no address. So it's important we call it a stop. That's where we have an on-road transaction. And so here, they might have a very low stop per hour, but that's expected in this area of the world. Here, it might be much higher. But it's important to know, so if you're thinking today's a normal day, you know your stop per hour is 15. Important. But then tomorrow comes, and in this actual geography, you have much more. You have 20. You have 25. Can you still get everything done by the time you need to? If time matters.
So Gigi, so these were new routes being created. Were the drivers having to do even more density? I'm just trying to, or having to do more deliveries than normal? Is that, yeah.
They have more work, more customers to deliver to that day in that geography. That makes sense. So,
absolutely.
So what we do is we flex it. This is a term we use. I'm sure others use it. And so now you have a smaller geography, but in that same area, and you move some of those packages to this route. These routes in these columns represent a team of couriers. And so on a heavy day, you might get a smaller area, but you still have enough work to keep you busy for that time period. And you flex towards your starting point. And so you might have to add this what we call like a part-time route for the day. And that way you can get everything done. But these routes still go out every day. But it's how you operate as a team. That's how you get through the day with the same number of people, right?
Right. So a lot of complexity built into this, and so I want to pivot. So thank you for that, Gigi. Let's, Dan. I'm sorry, Catherine. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about how you guys have solved some of your challenges?
So basically, we just leaned into innovation and collaboration. And one of the main changes that we had to make is basically how we distribute food. It's usually very high touch, very personable, and we had to completely change our protocols to make sure that we were social distancing. So now we offer touchless drive-through models in order to safeguard the people that we're serving, our staff, and the volunteers. And essentially, it's pretty straightforward. People now drive to a designated site, remain in their vehicles. And we did advocate for some relaxing of some regulation, to your point, Gigi. So we no longer had to sign for specific food distributions. That made social distancing possible, actually. And so we maintain that 6 foot distance and simply put the food in people's trunks. And then people can go about their day. And we are serving literally thousands of people per distribution. We also leaned into technology. We had a new platform, and we're now accelerating its pilot that enables people facing hunger to actually order the food box that they need online. It's a dignified approach, it's convenient, and then they can select the site where to pick it up and the time. And that enables us, rather than having a long line of people, it helps us, again, just make sure that we're having this low contact distributions. And then I was excited, I'm so glad that Dan was on the call, and I know he's with Uber Freight, but in Florida, we're partnering with Uber Health and Humana to deliver food to people with illnesses and who are homebound. And I have to say that is really, that last mile is one of the most difficult challenges that we face, even in the best of time. People who are homebound, either because they're elderly or facing some kind of illness or some kind of disability. So we're just so delighted to have that partnership. And I'm also excited to hear from Gigi maybe later on about how FedEx is assisting with home delivery too. And I guess I'll just save that because I think Gigi will speak to that soon.
Yeah.
And then we also, because our donations were so down, we have done more purchasing of food than we ever have historically as a nonprofit. And in fact, in some weeks, our purchases were up 1,200%. And we've really made this robust grocery portal available to our member food banks where they can order directly online from the distributors that are collaborating with us on this. And then lastly, I just want to highlight that the loss of volunteers, I cannot really stress how significant that is, the loss of that workforce essentially. And so now we're partnering with the National Guard and other innovative partners that Gigi will actually speak to help fill in those gaps. And that's led to some really interesting collaborations. And one of them being with Goodwill in Orange County. So they were closing all their stores and yet did not want to furlough their workforce. And so they were actually staffing the food bank in order to help us augment distributions. And so that was a really beautiful way of partnering. And so that just gives you some of the win-wins that we've been able to accomplish during this time.
Yeah, some terrific stories. And I know we have so many things that I want everybody to know about, but Dan, tell me a little bit about Uber Freight's response. And you've teed up, some great challenges, but I guess talk to us a little bit about how you guys have responded.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, similar to what we said about the difficulty in giving food away, I think we saw this as an opportunity also that there's sometimes a difficulty in how to get food from one place to another. And so at Uber Freight, more so than a pivot, it was an opportunity to apply our services and technology to these situations to facilitate the move of those goods. So through a series of very fortunate events, I just happened to have FEMA as a prospect, and through another series of fortunate internal exchanges, I came across the Voluntary Liaison Office at FEMA, which I did not know existed before the pandemic. And FEMA, that office referred us to Kathy's organization, Allen. And then I got to know Kathy and company, and Kathy was able to refer us to a number of 501c3 organizations, some large, some small, who were looking to move their goods across the country, PPE, food, et cetera. And we're certainly looking for any assistance that we could provide. And through those programs I mentioned earlier, the Move What Matters campaign, which went across Uber writ large, and then the COVID relief campaign within Freight, we were able to work with those entities. And based on their sophistication level, we were able to apply the variety of ways we can move freight for them. So what was really kind of the most rewarding was that even the smallest 501c3 with 2 loads, I was able to give them access to our shipper platform, which is a desktop application where they were able literally to, with no experience, create and ship a load on their own. We, of course, monitor those loads, but it allowed for the siphoning off of that work to allow me to go after and bring in more people into the tent to do just that. So we had a number of 501c3s who were able to use our shipper platform tool to move loads on their own across the country that were designated relief loads. We were able to take email requests from organizations who could not or were unable to use the shipper platform. And then what was really terrific was in some cases where the entity facilitating the move was not able to be the shipper of record. It just so happened that they were actually moving goods from one of our existing customers to a recipient. And that way we were able to actually just utilize our already integrated system with that customer to move the goods at the behest of that agency. And so it was just an opportunity to apply all of the angles of Uber Freight to the situation and then continue that operation through today. In terms of giving these companies the ability to move those loads across the country. So that's where, again, my comment has been, I have been joyfully busy for the last month, moving loads, practicing my trade. So I want to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to do something, because I was twiddling my thumbs for a while when the pandemic hit, because again, my primary clients were not moving anything. Now, again, while unfortunate, the pandemic has given me the opportunity to learn my craft, move goods, and educate others on how to do so. And I would echo Gigi's comments too, that, and Catherine's, that again, this kind of crisis allows for the clearing of a lot of red tape, whether it's state governments or private entities, to really move quickly and make decisions fast to get things to where they need to go. So it's really been a rewarding experience for us overall. And as Catherine knows, we've done a lot of work with Feeding America and food banks in general.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think you teed up kind of the last question, and I think you've hit it, but I'll come back around to you. So I want to start with Gigi. Tell me, I mean, we're at a conference on private-public partnerships. Tell me about the value of those partnerships and how have they helped with really building resilience, either things that you've done internally to help build resilience for FedEx and your customers, or the things that, the special project you talked about?
Interesting. Well, FedEx is a very big company, and the company knows it has opportunities, and it's not structured in a way that everything has to go through an office to do it. And so every community that we reside in, specifically, we can serve. And so I know here in Memphis, we got involved very much at a granular level on food services. As Catherine pointed out, we realized very quickly, especially in this community, the number of children that depend on lunch and breakfast every day from our schools. And so there was donations and volunteers, even from FedEx, getting involved. So I wouldn't be able to name all of the efforts, but the point being is, when there's an opportunity, right? When there's an opportunity, we basically have the clearance to get involved, if appropriate. So that's happening across the globe right now, as best it can, and then certainly on a more a larger magnitude level, we are flying relief items where needed, or trucking. But flying, we can do that because we have the flights, and that's something
you own planes.
Right. We have planes, so and that's good and bad. An airline is expensive to maintain, but it's good. So we're doing that as well. We have a department that looks at the skills of people and aligns them where skills are needed. So that's how I got asked to work with Team Rubicon, as example. So there's many things happening. I do want to point out the whole humanitarian aspect of this. Nobody likes what's going on, but it's bringing out the best in people, and it's bringing people together where normally we wouldn't, because we're all focused on what we do and profit and service and everything we do in our world. And ironically, a circumstance like this, and we break all those boundaries and you just do what's needed. And I think we could do more to get closer and be able to quickly respond, if that makes sense. Because I feel personally we didn't respond quick enough, but point being is we could probably do a lot more if you just know who's who and who to talk to. So yeah, as Catherine pointed out, if there's food needed, we can help move that food where it's needed as well.
That's right.
But you don't know what you don't know, right? And so, anything we do going forward, it wouldn't hurt to sit down and talk about what we could do better if this were to happen again, or something like this were to happen again.
Together. Yeah. And Gigi, you and I talked about Dave Luss from your Global Security Operations Center the other day, and I think every conference I've ever heard him speak at, he talks about not exchanging business cards during the crisis. So you have echoed him beautifully. While It's company line. So while I'm getting ready to turn to Catherine to ask her about her experience with partnerships, I know there's an opportunity for people to enter questions for our panelists. So I know Zach, who from the U.S. Chamber, is going to be able to help us with those. So while we're waiting on those to come in, Catherine, let me ask you about partnerships and how have these partnerships helped you build resilience with the member food banks you're supporting?
Sure. Kathy, of all your questions, this is the one I'm most excited about because I just want to be emphatically clear that without collaborating with our grocery store partners, food manufacturers, government agencies like FEMA and the USDA, the National Guard, the panelists here with us, FedEx and Uber Freight, Uber Health, the regular Uber, we're actually partnering with all facets of Uber. And I'm sure many of the audience members with local businesses contributing, there is no way that Feeding America's network could have met this moment without you. There is just absolutely no way. And I just wanted to touch on a few examples. I've already spoken about the National Guard, and we also collaborated with an organization, Team Rubicon, that I think Gigi is aware of. That again just stepped in when our volunteer base was so low to help us day in, day out. There was also a time I mentioned how there was a constraint in the supply chain where there was really very limited non-perishable goods available. And General Mills actually stepped up because of the closures of so many restaurants. They had some production lines open, and they actually produced $5 million worth of non-perishable foods off of those lines and donated them to the Feeding America Network, which was really just astounding. And the panelists here today, their organizations have just made an amazing contribution. I will stress that transportation, even in the best of times, is a huge barrier for people facing hunger. In fact, 67% of the people we serve have to choose between paying for transportation or food. And so the fact that Uber is helping us with these last miles to make these deliveries, and FedEx and partnering with Team Rubicon to do the same is nothing short of a miracle for the families that they're helping. I also wanted to call out that the cost of freight for our food bank members often prohibits us from accessing even free food. And it certainly adds to the cost of our purchased freight. And so the fact that Uber Freight is basically donating the cost of freight to our members has just been absolutely phenomenal. And just to give you a quick snapshot, just in the month of June, Uber Freight helped us access 2 million pounds of food, helping us with 59 loads. And that's all across the country. And another element about our business, not to get too much in the weeds, but you have no idea how many cardboard boxes that we need on a daily basis. And FedEx has stepped up and actually paid for the shipping for us to access these cardboard boxes that are absolutely critical for us to be able to move food safely. So these are just a few of thousands of examples of the way that people are just stepping in and filling gaps and bridging bridges to make sure that children and seniors and your neighbors have the food that they need in this moment.
That is terrific, Catherine, and I love the statistics that you shared. And the thing that I love most about those statistics is sometimes it's the smallest things. I sometimes tell people, look, the most important component in the supply chain is a box, because ultimately nothing is going to get to the consumer without that box. Freight, yes, but if you don't have packaging, it's not going to get there. The other thing that's really important is those may have been, yes, $5 million is a huge amount of money in food, but in the general, global perspective here, right, that's not a huge amount for a multi-global corporate or multinational corporation, right? And so businesses can do a lot. Gigi's time that was donated, right? Building that routing plan would have taken her some time, right, Gigi? But it's in the scope of your day, right. It's not huge, but the impact that it's had. So I guess one of the questions that we want to talk about here is, are there other impact stories? Do you have numbers, pounds moved? Catherine, you shared some of that. Dan, anything from you? And I'll just throw this out to any of you guys.
Yeah, I would echo. Catherine really covered it so well with what we've done with Feeding America. And then outside of that, through the connections that Alan has made to Uber Freight, we've moved in additional. We're now pushing probably close to another 50 loads of relief supplies through, I think at last count, maybe 14 or 15 different entities across the country in the same exact manner. So it's, again, it just, like I said, it's hard to put all of those pieces together. And so we have been welcoming the opportunities to do just that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just add, Kathy, so just since March, our network of food banks has distributed 1.3 billion meals to people facing hunger, which is really a 40% increase compared to the same time last year. And it puts us on track, if we keep up this same pace, to distribute 6 billion meals this year alone.
That's huge.
We did not know we were capable of that. I will say that.
So you said you did 4.5 billion last year, so a third increase this year. That's astonishing.
Yeah, if we maintain the same pace.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I fear you may have to, given the trajectory of what we're seeing. Gigi, any statistics from the routing optimization or any of your other projects that you have that you can share?
I'll share one. It's not related to moving food or packages, but it's regarding process, which is my kind of specialty area. That's what I do. My parents still don't know what that means, but that's okay. I was asked to work with a school safety program here in Memphis. And several of my coworkers came with me, and we worked with a school in Memphis that had 15 incidents, traffic incidents, where children were hit by cars, 8 of which were fatalities. And they just needed someone to look at the circumstance and give some suggestions. So we did that, and we gave some suggestions, and FedEx supported it, I think through some funding, and the city supported it. That was 8 years ago, and they have not had an incident or a fatality yet. And I'm not saying it to tout it, but sometimes just taking a step back, looking at how something's working. We looked at drop off and we looked at pickup of the children. There were many terrible, it was a terrible layer. But if you don't take a step back to really look at what's going on, you're not going to fix it. You know, putting more traffic monitors could help. But one of the traffic monitors was one of the ones that got hit. So point being is,
wow.
Yeah. And so I just tout it because it could be the process, kind of like the route design. You know, you could have any just hand out deliveries and have them take it out, or you could do it a little more efficiently, especially if it's up lasting a while. And when I met with Team Rubicon, I don't think any of us thought this was going to last this long, but here we are, right? So, and I was quite impressed that they said, we want to understand how we can do this better, because it lasts a long time.
Yeah. I'm always reminded by my husband, who was trained as an engineer, that you're looking for the elegant solution, and sometimes it's the simple, keeping it simple. So I'm just gonna put another reminder out to the audience to go ahead and put your questions into the chat window for us, and our room moderator will get those to us. We have about 5 minutes remaining. And in that time, until we see any audience questions, I would love to know, we've talked about some things that went really, really well. Does anyone have a horror story that they want to share that from the pandemic situation where it didn't go well at the beginning? Yeah, it sounds like Gigi's got one. Go ahead.
I think I can share this. So the company.
Okay. Yeah, please don't say anything you can't.
Known as an enterprise. So we have several large companies. We call them operated companies. And interestingly enough, we operate independently, but we collaborate collectively. So point being is we have a ground operating company, and they move packages on the ground primarily. They're the low cost solution. We're the time solution. And so we had planned in March to start moving some of our residential packages to ground, so that just a better network to move those packages. So that happened right when the pandemic was happening, and the volumes for residential were growing and the commercial were decreasing because no one was open. But people were home and they were ordering everything you could imagine online. And so they ended up getting pummeled with a lot of more volume than anyone expected, but no one expected the pandemic to happen, right? So it wasn't a horror story, nothing terrible happened, except literally we had to contract our express couriers to help them. So it was it was silly. But
it was unintended.
Right.
Yeah. you had plans. You had plans, right? And the pandemic has done everything to disrupt all of our plans.
Right.
Catherine, Dan, you guys have an experience. Dan, you want to talk about how much pet food you've moved for?
Yeah, it's exactly what I was going to mention. It's not a horror story, but it's extremely comical. For me, what happened to me, in short, that when we're moving freight, you're typically dealing with warehouses that are open at certain hours, and you can have first come, first serve, and they're used to big trucks coming in. But we had this unique situation of, in one particular instance, moving relief pet food. And what's really interesting, I learned something really new. People who don't have the funds to purchase pet food will actually begin giving their food to their pets. And so pet food is actually a huge help for low-income families and families in need to prevent that from happening. And so that was a revelation for me. I'd never thought of it that way. But what the more comical part, or the humorous part, was that you were having pet food come from a big warehouse to a small shelter somewhere. And one of my favorite stories was that I was told that the pet food had to arrive at a particular shelter at 8:30 in the morning sharp. Period. no wiggle room. But again, that's where I was glad to help out and reach out, because these shelters, they have to find someone with a forklift perhaps, or find volunteers, as Catherine mentioned, to come and unload a 53-foot truckload full of pet food. So to Gigi's point of people coming together and all these opportunities, that was wonderful to see that these shelters across the country are doing these types of things. And one of the more unique situation was I had one small organization, great idea, filling rain barrels with emergency shelf-stable meal kits to send to people in need. So the rain barrel is filled with emergency supplies, food, etc. And then of course the rain barrel itself can act as another way to get water. And there was a very small organization doing that. And one of my other organizations that came to me through the crisis volunteered to move the freight for them on our shipper platform. So just a tremendous example of everything coming together. Yeah, really, really wonderful to watch.
Yeah. So I think we are closing here on time now. I just want to express my gratitude to all of you for all of our audience for listening, and to all of our panelists for sharing these amazing, amazing stories. I know that if you want to reach us, all of our biographical and contact information will be in the portal for you to access. Please reach out to any of us, and we are just thrilled to have spoken with you all today. Matt, I think we're done.